When I look back, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when everything began to fall apart. If you had asked me then, I would have said my life was going exactly as planned. Career on track, a loving relationship, and a family that, though complicated at times, was solid in its own way. I never imagined that the people I trusted most would betray me in the most profound way possible. But that's the thing about betrayal. It's always unexpected, and it never comes from your enemies. It comes from the ones you love. Jake and I had been together for 3 years when he proposed. It was the kind of relationship that felt effortless from the beginning, as if we had been meant to find each other. He was everything I had wanted in a partner: kind, supportive, and, at least to my knowledge at the time, trustworthy. We built a life together, talked about our future, and I genuinely believed we were on the same page. When he asked me to marry him, there wasn't a doubt in my mind that I was ready to spend the rest of my life with him. Jake fit easily into my life. He got along with my friends, charmed my parents, and even bonded with my brother, Matt, almost immediately. In fact, Matt and Jake became close in a way that surprised me. I remember feeling grateful that 2 of the most important men in my life were forming a friendship. Matt had always been protective of me, and I took his acceptance of Jake as a sign that I had chosen the right partner. Matt was just a year older than me, and growing up, we were inseparable. We shared everything: secrets, dreams, and the trials of childhood. We had our share of sibling rivalries, but there was always an underlying closeness that I valued deeply. Matt was my rock, the person I knew I could always turn to, no matter what. I trusted him implicitly, just as I trusted Jake. But trust is a fragile thing, and when it's shattered, it feels as though your entire world has been turned upside down. The first signs that something was wrong were subtle, almost imperceptible at first. Jake started staying late at work more often than usual, and while he had always been open about his day-to-day activities, he became more guarded with his phone. I'd catch him turning the screen away from me or quickly shutting it off when I entered the room. It was unlike him, but I didn't press. I trusted him, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who jumped to conclusions over something that might have been harmless. At the same time, Matt began to withdraw. It wasn't overt at first, just a gradual distancing that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He stopped coming over for dinners as frequently, and when I'd invite him to hang out with Jake and me, he often had excuses. Work was busy, or he wasn't feeling well. At first, I didn't think much of it. Matt had always been independent, and I figured he was just going through a busy period in his life. But as the weeks passed, the unease grew. Something wasn't right, and though I couldn't explain it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. I remember the day I found out the truth with a clarity that still haunts me. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Jake had told me he was going out of town for a weekend trip with some friends. He had been distant lately, and I figured the time away would do him some good. I even encouraged it, hoping that a break from the routine would help him shake whatever was bothering him. But as soon as he left, that gnawing feeling in my stomach returned. I couldn't explain it, but something about the way he had been acting felt off. I decided to visit Matt, thinking that maybe he could help me figure out what was going on, if anyone could talk me through my worries. It was my brother. When I pulled up to Matt's apartment, I noticed Jake's car parked in the driveway. My heart sank, and my mind began racing. Why would Jake be at Matt's place when he was supposed to be out of town? I sat in the car for what felt like an eternity, trying to convince myself that there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe Jake had stopped by to see Matt before leaving, or maybe he had forgotten something. But deep down, I already knew. I walked up to the front door, my legs heavy with dread, and let myself in using the spare key Matt had given me years ago. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. As I walked down the hallway, I heard movement coming from the living room, and when I turned the corner, I saw them. Jake and Matt were sitting together on the couch. But it wasn't just that. They were close, too close, wrapped in each other's arms in a way that made it clear what had been happening behind my back. In that moment, time seemed to stop. My heart pounded in my chest, and it felt like the room was spinning. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My fiancé and my brother, the 2 people I trusted most in the world, had betrayed me in the most intimate way imaginable. They didn't notice me at first, but when they did, the looks on their faces said it all. Guilt, shock, and fear flashed across their expressions. But I couldn't stay to hear their excuses. I turned and walked out of the apartment without a word. My entire world had just been shattered, and I couldn't bear to stand there and face the people who had done it. I drove aimlessly for hours that day, trying to process what I had just witnessed. How long had it been going on? How could they do this to me? Jake, the man I was supposed to marry, and Matt, my own brother. 2 people I had trusted completely. 2 people I loved. I felt sick to my stomach, as though everything I thought I knew had been ripped away from me in an instant. In the days that followed, I spiraled into a deep sense of despair. I didn't speak to either Jake or Matt, and I didn't answer their calls or messages. I couldn't. The pain was too raw, too overwhelming. Every time I thought about what they had done, I felt like I was being suffocated by the weight of their betrayal. I spent those days alone, trying to figure out how I had missed the signs, how I had been so blind to what was happening right in front of me. I replayed every interaction between Jake and Matt, every moment we had spent together, trying to see where things had gone wrong. But no matter how hard I tried to piece it together, I couldn't make sense of it. All I knew was that the life I had been building was gone. The hardest part wasn't losing Jake. It was losing Matt. My brother had been my closest ally, the person I had always turned to for support. I had trusted him with everything, and he had betrayed me in a way I never thought possible. I couldn't understand how he could do something like this, how he could destroy the bond we had shared for so many years. It felt like a part of me had been ripped away, and I didn't know how to move forward. Eventually, I knew I had to confront them. I couldn't avoid them forever, and I needed closure. I needed to hear their explanations, even if I already knew that no excuse would ever be good enough. I went back to Matt's apartment one evening, determined to face them both and put an end to the nightmare. When I arrived, they were waiting for me, clearly prepared for the confrontation. Their faces were filled with guilt and shame, but I didn't care. I wasn't there to comfort them or to listen to their apologies. I told Jake that our relationship was over. There would be no wedding, no future together. He had destroyed everything, and there was no going back. I told him to pack his things and leave my life for good. Then I turned to Matt, and I told him that he was no longer my brother. Family is supposed to protect you, to stand by you through thick and thin. Matt had done the opposite. He had betrayed me in the most personal way possible, and there was no forgiveness for that. They both tried to explain, to offer apologies, but I didn't want to hear it. There was nothing they could say that would change what they had done. I walked out of that apartment for the last time, knowing that I would never look back. The days that followed were a blur of grief and anger. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of emotions, unsure of how to move forward. I had lost two of the most important people in my life, and the pain was unbearable. But even in the midst of that pain, I knew that I had to find a way to rebuild. I threw myself into work, into hobbies, into anything that would distract me from the devastation I felt inside. Slowly, I began to heal. The pain didn't disappear overnight, but with time, it became more manageable. I started to find peace in the little things, in spending time with friends who had always been there for me, in focusing on my own happiness. As the months passed, I realized that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I had survived the worst kind of betrayal, and I had come out on the other side. I had learned to trust myself again, to rely on my own strength, and to find happiness.